Good evening. Tonight we're diving into something a little less glamorous and a lot more itchy. The world of Roman frontier life. Specifically, what it was like to be a lowly Roman soldier freezing your toga off on the damp edge of the empire. So before you curl up and start slipping into that pre-sleep fog, do me a favor. Tap that like button, if you end up learning something tonight. Subscribe only if you genuinely enjoy falling asleep to the gentle sound of ancient misery. And, most importantly, leave a comment, telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I love seeing who's drifting off to dreams from Norway, New York, or New South Wales. Bonus points if you're listening in a blanket burrito or have a cat slowly taking over your pillow. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let your muscles go limp like a poorly made Roman sandbag. Let's ease into tonight's dreamy journey together. A little longer, a little funnier, and just boring enough to be perfect. Let's not sugarcoat this, folks. Being a Roman soldier on the frontier wasn't just unpleasant. It was an Olympic-level test of patience, endurance, and chafing. We all love to picture the Roman legions as these unstoppable, gleaming juggernauts of order and discipline, marching in perfect lines to the beat of victory. But for every soldier basking in the sun outside the Colosseum, there were hundreds banished to the damp, muddy edges of nowhere, sent to guard borders that nobody even wanted against people who were just as annoyed to see them as they were to be there. Let's set the scene. It's the year 132 CE. You're stationed at the far edge of the Roman Empire in northern Britannia. It's raining. Again. It's always raining. You haven't seen the sun since you arrived. Your armor smells like sheep, and your bunkmate sings in his sleep. Your fortress, it is less Rome, has finest engineering, and more wet logs lashed together by a guy named Festus. The roof leaks, the floor leaks, and the walls, surprise, also leak. If you drop your bread, you don't pick it up. Not because it's dirty, but because it's probably floating away. Your job? Wake up before dawn. Patrol some mud. Eat something that might be bread. Stand at attention for 5 hours. Argue with a goat. Then spend the rest of the day trying not to freeze, starve, or get stabbed by angry locals who still think you're some kind of demon that eats babies. Let's talk food. The daily rations were a joyless parade of barley porridge, stale bread, mystery meat, and occasionally a sad handful of olives. If you were lucky, someone would trade you a boiled egg. If you were unlucky, that boiled egg was 4 weeks old and carried a personal grudge. Water, technically clean, if you're into swamp-flavored beverages with notes of mildew. Wine was safer, so they watered it down and called it posca, a sour, vinegar-like concoction that tasted like a hangover in a bucket. Soldiers drank it constantly, not because they liked it, but because it made their job slightly less depressing. The uniform. Not winning any comfort awards. You've got a linen tunic, some scratchy wool, and then armor made of metal strips designed specifically to pinch the skin under your arms every time you breathe too hard. On your feet, sandals, open-toed, in the mud, for years. With 0 socks, unless you got a bonus shipment, in which case you'd guard those socks like they were made of solid gold. Hygiene? You shared a sponge on a stick. Enough said. Now, let's discuss your co-workers. You're bunking with 7 other men in a space the size of a modern pantry. Privacy? Non-existent. Smell? Legendary. These are men who haven't bathed in 3 weeks and somehow sweat through their armor. One guy snores like a dying minotaur. Another clips his toenails into the fire. Someone has a pet ferret. No one knows where it came from. And yet, this was the good part of the day, because when you weren't stuck in the barracks, you were on patrol, which meant marching through terrain best described as aggressively moist, while hoping you didn't get ambushed by a gang of angry locals with slingshots and terrible dental hygiene. And they hated you. Not in a fun, cartoon villain way. In a real generational trauma, I will teach my children to hate your children kind of way. You see, from their perspective, Rome had just appeared. With its taxes, its temples, its endless parade of laws about how wide your sandals could be. You were the walking symbol of occupation. You were the reason they had to bow to some old guy in a toga who couldn't pronounce their village's name. So, ambushes, common. Pit traps, also common. Poisoned beer, surprisingly common. You had to sleep with one eye open and one hand on your gladius. And if you lost it, well, too bad. You were buying your next one yourself, deducted straight from your already insulting salary. Oh yes, the pay. You were promised a solid wage, enough to buy land someday, start a farm, retire somewhere warm, but what actually happened? Deductions. For food, for boots, for lost equipment, for damages caused by your tent mate drunkenly setting fire to the latrine. At the end of the month, you were lucky to walk away with anything more than a handful of bronze coins and a splinter in your dignity. So, why do it? Well, if you were poor, joining the legions was one of the few ways to not starve. Rome offered citizenship after 25 years of service, assuming you didn't die first. That was the prize. Endure a quarter-century of frostbite, fungus, and barely cooked stew, and you too could become a real Roman. And if you did die, best-case scenario, you got a basic wooden grave marker with your name misspelled. Worst case, you just became part of the floor. Let's not forget morale. The army tried, they really did. There were festivals, drinking nights, even a little gambling, because nothing says Roman bonding like losing your last denarius to the guy who stole your blanket last week. Some soldiers made friends, lifelong ones. Others snapped and tried to desert, which, by the way, was punishable by death, or flogging, or getting paraded through the camp in chains while everyone shouted helpful tips like, "Run faster next time," and discipline, intense. Miss a drill? Punished. Step out of line? Punished. Look at a centurion funny? You guessed it. Punished. Roman commanders were big on making examples, so if one guy messed up, the whole unit paid for it. Sometimes literally. The worst was decimation, where if a unit really screwed up, the commander would line everyone up, and every 10th man was executed by his own comrades, because nothing builds trust like forced murder. So yes, Rome was efficient, but kind? Not exactly. Now before you start thinking, well, at least they got to retire with some land, let me stop you there. Retirement often meant getting dumped in a colony full of other cranky veterans where the locals still hated you and your back ached like Jupiter's wrath every time it rained. You might get a patch of farmland, you might get a wooden shack. You might get robbed by the next batch of legionnaires who heard you had extra socks. And yet, somehow, the legions kept going. For centuries. Through snow and sand, rebellion and boredom, plague and policy. Because the Roman machine was relentless. It didn't matter how miserable you were, as long as you followed orders, kept your gear polished, and didn't complain too loudly about the fungus in your helmet. So, next time you see a statue of a proud Roman soldier standing tall in armor, remember, he was probably cold, hungry, underpaid, and desperately hoping someone would invent better shoes. But he stood there anyway. Because Rome doesn't care if you're uncomfortable. Rome only cares that the line holds. And that, friends, is why it absolutely sucked to be a Roman soldier on the frontier. Let's switch sides for a moment. Because while you were shivering in your little fort, the locals were plotting. Enter Boudica, queen of the Iceni, fierce, furious, fashionably terrifying. Her story starts in what we now call East Anglia. Her husband, King Prasutagus, tried to be diplomatic with Rome, made them co-heirs in his will. Rome took one look at that and said, "Cool story, we'll take everything." They annexed the kingdom, publicly beat Boudica, and did unspeakable things to her daughters. That's not just villainy. That's supervillain origin story stuff. Boudica didn't just mourn, she mobilized, united angry tribes. Fueled by rage, grief, and the kind of focus that comes from having literally nothing to lose, she led a rebellion that lit Roman settlements on fire, literally. Let's dig into the chaos she created. First, Camuladunum, Colchester. A Roman settlement complete with a shiny temple to Emperor Claudius. Locals hated it. Rome poured resources into it. Boudica burned it to the ground. Eyewitness accounts say the temple burned for 2 full days. The Roman defenders were so few, they had to barricade themselves inside while the building collapsed around them. Spoiler, didn't end well for them. Next target, Londinium, aka modern-day London. A bustling Roman town even then, full of traders, officials, and, for some reason, an alarming number of bakers. Governor Suetonius, seeing Boudica's horde incoming, abandoned the city. That's right. The Roman governor packed up and ran. Boudica's forces arrived and razed the city, reportedly killing thousands. Total scorched earth energy. And then, Verulamium, now St. Albans. It wasn't spared either. You were Roman or you were gone. Her forces reportedly moved fast, overwhelming small garrisons, and didn't bother taking prisoners. It was vengeance. Loud, fiery, cathartic vengeance. So who were these rebels? Not a trained army. Farmers, hunters, craftspeople. Women fought beside men. Some even rode chariots. Yes, chariots. Boudica herself was described as tall, commanding, with a voice that could shatter glass, and braids that screamed, "Do not mess with me." For months they held terror over Roman Britain. And let's be clear, this wasn't just a small uprising. This was a full-blown rebellion that killed as many as 70,000 to 80,000 Romans and Roman sympathizers. Eventually, though, Rome did what Rome does best. It regrouped. Governor Suetonius pulled together a disciplined force and chose his battleground carefully, somewhere narrow, with forest on both sides. Boudica's army, although massive, was unwieldy. No central command, no military training. They were passionate, but chaos doesn't beat strategy. The Romans formed a wedge and plowed through. It was brutal. A massacre. According to Tacitus, even the rebels' own families who had come to watch in wagons ended up blocking their retreat. As for Boudica, stories differ. Some say she poisoned herself. Others claim she fell ill. Some think she vanished into legend. But here's what we do know. She scared the sandals off the Roman Empire. A woman, a mother, a queen, who went from suffering to leading the largest revolt Rome ever faced in Britain. Even centuries later, Victorians put up statues of her. Idealized, of course. No grime, no blood, no actual Celtic reality. But still, they honored the fire. And if you're wondering how a woman managed to lead thousands in a patriarchal age, the answer is simple. Pain plus purpose. Unstoppable. Boudica's name lives. You'll find her in poetry, pop culture, feminist essays, and in the occasional awkward tattoo. She's history's original "Don't Mess With Me" poster girl. Now, let's get cozy with some clay and ink. Vindolanda was a Roman fort in northern Britain, near Hadrian's Wall. Cold, windy, and, as we now know, full of gossipy, whiny, completely relatable soldiers. The fort preserved a collection of wooden tablets, basically postcards written with ink on thin slivers of wood. Archaeologists found them in a waterlogged ditch. Gross for them. Treasure for us. Among the first letters translated was this absolute gem. "Please send more socks." That's not a joke. It's an actual message. The Roman military might have conquered most of Europe, but they still couldn't issue warm footwear. There are over 1,300 of these tablets, and they're a window into the everyday mind of the Roman soldier. One complains about the weather. Another asks for more wine. One letter is an invitation to a birthday party. Possibly the earliest known example of RSVP stress. There's a shopping list, tunics, sandals, oil, writing tablets. One mentions someone losing a cloak and blaming the donkey. Another accuses a guy of taking too many breaks during ditch digging. They show humanity. These weren't faceless warriors. These were tired, cold dudes missing their wives, sick of their rations, and deeply suspicious of anyone from the next barracks over. Some tablets are deeply personal. There's a letter from a soldier's wife asking how he's doing and whether he's received her parcel. There's a note that may have been written by a literate slave. Some letters are full of emotion, longing, sarcasm, even poetry. Others are bureaucratic. Inventories, supply chains, troop movements. But even those are dripping with passive-aggressive tone. We have requested boots 4 times, still waiting. You can almost hear the eye roll. One officer signs every letter with unnecessary flourishes like the Latin equivalent of best vibes, quintus. And you start to see how mundane this military life was. They weren't out conquering every day. They were balancing books, avoiding patrols, trading gossip, and writing increasingly desperate letters about missing shipments. These tablets also show how diverse Roman forts were. Names from all over the empire: Gaul, Syria, Africa, the Danube, men, and sometimes women, pulled from every corner of Rome's vast territory, dropped into rainy northern Britain, and told to bond over bread and boredom. Vindolanda's dig site also revealed more: shoes, hundreds of them, combs, coins, brooches, even a child's drawing. They played board games. They carved messages on walls. They may have had pet dogs. Bones suggest some animals lived in the barracks. And then there's the graffiti. Latin jokes, nicknames, doodles of what might be, and I kid you not, Roman butts. Vindolanda was a living, breathing place. You can almost hear it. The clang of hammers, the laughter in the baths, the arguments over wine rations, the sigh of another guard shift, and the ever-present plea, "Please send more socks." Now that we've survived the frontier and the rebellions, let's change into something silk-lined and head to the marble heart of Rome. You're a Roman senator. Congrats. You've aged into your late 40s, own multiple villas, have a toga for each mood, and enjoy an almost Olympic-level dedication to passive aggression. Your day starts at dawn. Not because you have to, but because it's good optics. Your clients, a swarm of social climbers, are lined up outside your domus, hoping for a kind word, a job lead, or a small loan they'll never repay. You greet them while pretending to be humble. "Oh, please, I'm just a servant of the Republic." You lie while checking to see if your sandals match your toga trim. From there, it's off to the Curia, the Senate building. It's part council meeting, part retirement home, part ego fest. You sit among dozens of other senators, most of whom believe their opinions are gifts from the gods. Today's agenda? Tax reform in Sicilia. Or maybe a vote on how many days of games should honor Mars. Or a motion to rename a public fountain after someone's uncle. The speeches are long, flourished, quoted in Greek. Everyone's trying to one-up each other with metaphors. One guy tries to compare grain shortages to Neptune's wrath. Another calls his opponent less Roman than a Gaul's haircut. You clap politely. You doodle a little cat on your wax tablet. Lunch is excessive. You dine reclining on a couch. There's roast dormice, peacocks, bread with gold flakes. You nod while a poet recites something about virtue and figs. In the afternoon, you attend a public trial, a senator accused of embezzling aqueduct funds. You pretend to be shocked, but everyone knows aqueducts are just expensive cover stories. Bath time follows. The public baths are where real politics happen. In the hot rooms, you gossip. In the cold plunge, you forge alliances. Someone passes you a rumor about a general in Gaul. Another brags that he slept with 2 Vestal virgins. You pretend to care. Evening is for the cena, the great dinner. You host or attend. There's wine, there's entertainment. Maybe a juggler, maybe a philosopher. Maybe a play about love and betrayal performed by very sweaty actors. Conversations swirl around politics, food, and who's getting exiled next. By dessert, candied dates and honeyed locusts, you're buzzed. The guy next to you has removed his toga. Someone's playing the flute. You give a speech, badly. You return home under torchlight. Slightly tipsy, mildly paranoid, because Rome is a place of whispers. You know, one wrong word, one wrong vote, and you could wake up to find your cousin has declared you dangerously unstable and taken your seat. Still, you fall asleep in luxury, on a feather mattress, dreaming of power, of statues, of having your name carved into stone. And in the morning, the clients return. And there you have it, from the soggy misery of Roman border patrol to the silk-covered excess of senatorial dinners. Whether you stayed awake for all of it or drifted off somewhere around the sock letter, I hope you feel a little closer to the strange, stressful, sometimes hilarious lives of people long gone. History isn't always battles and emperors. Sometimes it's trench foot, bad soup, and a soldier crying because he forgot his underwear. Like the video if it helped you snooze. Subscribe if you want more sleepy dives into dusty corners of the past. And don't forget to comment where you're listening from. Seriously, it's the best part of my week. Sleep well, dream weird, and remember, somewhere in time, someone had it worse than you. Usually while holding a rusty spear and wondering what happened to their socks. And now, let's listen to the crackling fire. Good night, beautiful people, until next time.